I came to my son's wedding as a single mom, but my nameplate said fake mom. And then I stood tall, took the microphone, revealed the truth, and silence filled the hall as his lies collapsed. The grand ballroom at the plaza shimmered, a spectacle of breathtaking extravagance, crystal chandeliers, each a miniature galaxy of sparkling light, cast dancing reflections across the highly polished marble floors. The floral arrangements, towering creations of cascading orchids and fragrant lilies, seemed to defy gravity as they climbed the walls, transforming the vast space into a fragrant, opulent garden. Soft, golden light spilled from strategically placed sconces, adding a warm glow to the already dazzling scene. It was straight out of a fairy tale, a lavish dream woven from silk and champagne wishes, and it was exactly the kind of opulent affair Michael had always envisioned. I remembered him as a little boy, a mop of sandy brown hair perpetually falling into his earnest blue eyes, hunched over his sketch pad, filling pages with elaborate drawings of castles and princes and princesses, his small hand gripping a crayon with fierce concentration. Now, here he was, seemingly living his own fairy tale, a prince in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, about to marry his princess. Or so it seemed. A lump formed in my throat, a mixture of pride and a strange, unsettling premonition I couldn't quite place. I smoothed down the wrinkles in my simple navy blue dress. It wasn't flashy, but it was comfortable, and I thought it looked nice. Appropriate for a mother of the groom, not too attention-grabbing. I'd spent hours agonizing over what to wear, wanting to look presentable, but also acutely aware of Michael's sensitivity to appearances. He'd always liked me to be understated. Yes, that was the word. A quiet presence, a supporting character in the narrative of his life. My palms were damp, a nervous flutter in my stomach. I was excited, of course, thrilled to see him, to witness this milestone in his life. He'd worked so hard, clawing his way up the corporate ladder with a single-minded determination that both impressed and slightly worried me. He'd landed this gorgeous, successful woman, Amelia, whose family name held weight in certain New York circles, the kind of circles Michael had always aspired to. He deserved all the happiness in the world, I truly believed that. He was my pride and joy, my everything. Taking a deep breath, I tried to quell the rising anxiety. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the promise of celebration, felt heavy in my lungs. Around me, guests mingled, their laughter echoing through the ballroom, a symphony of clinking champagne flutes and polite greetings. I watched them, their faces flushed with excitement, their designer dresses shimmering under the chandelier lights, and I felt a pang of something akin to loneliness, a subtle disconnect from the glittering world around me. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for Michael. I was, immensely so. But there was a faint dissonance, a subtle undercurrent of unease that tugged at the edges of my joy. It was a feeling I'd become accustomed to over the years, a quiet hum of discomfort that always seemed to accompany Michael's ascent into the rarefied air of his chosen social sphere. I pushed it down, as I always did, telling myself it was just nerves, just the overwhelming nature of the occasion. Tonight was about Michael, about his happiness. My feelings were irrelevant. The unease I felt, that little hum of discomfort, wasn't new. It had been a subtle but persistent presence throughout Michael's life, a shadow lurking in the corners of our otherwise close relationship. Looking back, I could see the pattern, the small, almost imperceptible ways he'd tried to distance himself from the reality of our single-parent family, especially as he climbed higher and higher on the social ladder. In high school, he'd never invited friends over, not once. I'd chalked it up to teenage awkwardness, the typical desire for privacy. But then, there was the time his friend, a sweet, lanky boy named Josh, had unexpectedly shown up at our door, looking for Michael. I remember Michael's face, a mask of panic, as he practically shoved Josh back out the door, muttering something about needing to finish a project. Later, he'd snapped at me, his voice laced with an unfamiliar edge. "Why did you let him in? You know I don't bring friends home." I'd be hurt, confused. Our little apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean, comfortable. What was he so ashamed of? Then there were the school events. parent-teacher conferences, open houses, school plays. He'd always downplayed my role, introducing me as my mom, never elaborating, never mentioning that I was both mother and father. Once, during a career day at his elementary school, I'd volunteered to talk about my job as a librarian. He'd been furious. "Why would you do that?" "It's so boring," he'd hissed, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Looking back, I realized it wasn't the job itself that embarrassed him, but the fact that I was a single working mom, a stark contrast to the stay-at-home moms and high-powered dads of his classmates. He'd even invented stories, little white lies at first. A fictional uncle who took him on fishing trips, a family friend who owned a vacation home in the Hamptons. These fabricated narratives, carefully constructed to paint a picture of a conventional two-parent household, became more elaborate as he got older. In college, the uncle morphed into a successful businessman who mentored him, the family friend into a wealthy philanthropist who supported his education. I remember confronting him about it once, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and bewilderment. "Michael," I'd said, "why do you feel the need to invent these stories? I'm your family. I'm enough." He just shrugged, avoiding my gaze, mumbling something about fitting in. I'd always made excuses for him. Teenage insecurity, the pressure to conform, the desire to impress his peers. I told myself it was a phase, that he'd grow out of it. But the nagging feeling persisted, a constant reminder of the invisible wall he'd built between us, a wall constructed from his shame and my silence. Now, standing in this opulent ballroom, surrounded by the glittering symbols of his success, the hum of unease had grown into a full-blown tremor, a sickening premonition that the wall between us was about to crumble, revealing the fragile foundations of our carefully constructed reality. The initial greetings were a blur of smiles and air kisses. Amelia's parents, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of old-money confidence, were gracious, if a little reserved. Amelia herself, stunning in a Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than my car, hugged me warmly, her perfectly manicured hand lingering on my arm a moment longer than necessary. "I'm so glad you're here," she'd whispered, her eyes sparkling with genuine warmth. For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe things would be different now. Maybe Michael had finally accepted me, finally realized that his carefully constructed world didn't need to exclude me. I was directed towards a table near the dance floor, a prime spot with a clear view of the head table. A small, elegantly printed card bearing my name was placed at each setting. I found mine, tucked between two unfamiliar names. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for it, a strange mix of anticipation and dread swirling within me. My fingers brushed against the smooth cardstock. I picked it up, my eyes scanning the elegant script. The blood drained from my face, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. The name on the card wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah Miller, wasn't Michael's mom. It was fake mom. The two words, printed in delicate calligraphy, seemed to mock me, to sneer at my very existence. The card trembled in my hand, the elegant script blurring into an incomprehensible mess. My breath hitched in my throat, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. The room, the music, the laughter, all faded into a distant hum, the world narrowing to the two hateful words on that small, innocuous card. I looked around, my eyes darting from face to face, searching for some explanation, some sign that it was a mistake, a cruel joke. But the faces around me were oblivious, their smiles fixed, their conversations flowing effortlessly. No one seemed to notice the woman standing there, her hand trembling, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Had someone else seen it? Had they seen the nameplate, the cruel label meant for me? The thought sent a wave of shame washing over me, a burning humiliation that spread through my veins like wildfire. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to become invisible. I clutched the card tighter, my knuckles turning white, T-sharp edges digging into my palm. It was a physical manifestation of the pain, a tangible reminder of my son's betrayal. This wasn't just teenage embarrassment. This wasn't just a harmless white lie. This was a deliberate act of cruelty, a public declaration of his shame. He'd rather have a fake mom than acknowledge me, his real mother, the woman who had raised him, loved him, sacrificed everything for him. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. I blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, unwilling to let anyone see my pain, my humiliation. My throat tightened, making it hard to breathe. The opulent ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the happy faces. It all felt suffocating, a gilded cage closing in on me. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating weight of Michael's betrayal, to find a quiet corner where I could crumble without an audience. My legs felt weak, shaky. I stumbled back a step, my hand instinctively reaching for the back of a nearby chair to steady myself. The smooth, polished wood felt cool against my burning skin. My fingers gripped the chair back, the knuckles turning white, the only outward sign of the turmoil raging within me. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing myself to calm down, to think rationally. This was Michael's wedding day. I couldn't make a scene, couldn't ruin it for him, no matter how deeply he'd hurt me. But the thought of sitting there, pretending everything was normal, pretending I hadn't seen the nameplate, the cruel label he'd assigned me, it was unbearable. The injustice of it, the sheer audacity of his betrayal clawed at me, a raw, visceral pain that threatened to erupt. My hand, still clutching the nameplate, trembled uncontrollably. I opened my eyes, my gaze fixed on the head table where Michael sat, oblivious to my inner turmoil, his face beaming with happiness. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. I wanted to march over there, to confront him, to demand an explanation. I wanted to scream, to shout, to let loose the torrent of hurt and anger that was building inside me. But I hesitated. The years of ingrained restraint, the years of prioritizing his feelings over my own, held me back. What good would it do? Would a public confrontation really make things better? Would it erase the years of subtle slights, the carefully constructed lies, the deep-seated shame that had driven him to this ultimate act of betrayal? I took a deep, shaky breath, the air catching in my throat. My mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Should I confront him privately? Should I pretend I hadn't seen it? Should I just leave, quietly slip away and spare myself the further humiliation of witnessing his charade? No. A small, defiant voice whispered in the back of my mind. No, I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't pretend anymore. I deserved more than this. I deserved to be acknowledged, to be respected, to be loved for who I was, not for who Michael wanted me to be. And then, without thinking, without planning, driven by a force I didn't fully understand, I did something completely impulsive, something that would change everything. I turned towards the stage, my eyes fixed on the microphone standing tall and gleaming under the spotlight. My legs, still trembling, carried me forward, propelled by a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to reclaim my voice, to finally break free from the suffocating silence I had endured for far too long. My hand, still clutching that damnable fake mom card, felt clammy. I don't know what came over me. It was like an out-of-body experience. 1 minute I was frozen. The next, my feet were moving, carrying me towards the stage, towards the microphone. I vaguely registered the surprised glances of the guests, the confused murmurs rippling through the room, but my focus was laser-sharp, fixed on that gleaming microphone. It was like a beacon, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of my emotions. The band was in mid-song, some cheesy love ballad that blended into the background noise of my pounding heart. As I reached the stage, I impulsively grabbed the mic. The music screeched to a halt, the sudden silence amplifying the pounding in my ears. All eyes turned to me. Every single person in that opulent ballroom, dressed to the nines, sipping champagne, living their best lives, was now staring at me in my simple blue dress, clutching a nameplate that read "Fake Mom." My mouth felt dry, my tongue thick. For a moment, I just stood there, the weight of all those gazes pressing down on me, threatening to crush me. I could feel my hands trembling, the card practically vibrating in my grip. I took a deep breath, willing myself to speak, to break the suffocating silence. I need to say something, I stammered, my voice cracking, barely audible above the sudden hush. The microphone amplified the tremor in my voice, broadcasting my vulnerability to the entire room. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself to gather the fragments of my composure. I just found my place card, I continued, holding up the offending nameplate. It seems someone thought it would be funny to label me the fake mom. A ripple of confused murmurs spread through the crowd. People exchanged puzzled glances, their smiles faltering, their conversations dying down. I saw Amelia's parents, their faces etched with concern, leaning towards each other, whispering urgently. Amelia herself looked bewildered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the focus shifted. All eyes turned to Michael. He sat at the head table, frozen, his face draining of color. The jovial mask he'd been wearing all evening crumbled, revealing the stark fear beneath. The blood drained from his face, leaving him pale and ashen. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, his eyes darting nervously around the room, searching for an escape route. A gasp escaped someone's lips, followed by another and another. Whispers, like tiny venomous snakes, slithered through the room, their hushed tones carrying a weight of shock and disapproval. The carefully constructed facade of Michael's perfect wedding, the fairy tale he'd so meticulously crafted, began to crack, the fissures spreading outwards like spiderwebs, threatening to shatter the illusion entirely. Standing there, under the harsh glare of the spotlight, microphone clutched in my trembling hand, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My stomach churned, a nauseating mix of fear and adrenaline. What had I done? A cold dread seeped into my bones. Oh God, had I overreacted? Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? This was Michael's wedding, his special day. I should have handled this privately, discreetly. I should have swallowed my pride, plastered a smile on my face, and pretended everything was fine. I shouldn't have aired our dirty laundry in front of all these people, in front of his new in-laws, in front of Amelia. The thought of the judgment in their eyes, the whispers behind their hands, made me want to shrink into myself, to disappear into the plush carpeting. My cheeks burned with shame. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, spreading across my face. I imagined the headlines. Mother of the groom ruins wedding with meltdown. Bride's family horrified by groom's family drama. The thought made me want to crawl under a rock and never come out. But then, another wave of emotion crashed over me, this one hot and fierce and righteous. It was the culmination of years of suppressed hurt, years of silent sacrifices, years of swallowing my pride for the sake of his fragile ego, years of being the understated mom, the quiet presence in the background of his carefully curated life, years of pretending that his little white lies, his subtle rejections, didn't sting, didn't leave a mark. And that damn nameplate, fake mom, the two words echoed in my mind, a cruel mantra, a stark reminder of his deep-seated shame. He'd rather pretend I didn't exist than acknowledge me, the woman who had loved him unconditionally, who had worked tirelessly to provide for him, who had been both mother and father. The injustice of it, the sheer audacity of his betrayal fueled my anger, giving me the strength to stand there, under the scrutiny of all those eyes, and speak my truth. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by the ragged sound of my own breathing. I looked out at the sea of faces, their expressions ranging from shock and confusion to outright disgust. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had done the right thing. Maybe not the smartest thing, maybe not the most graceful thing, but the right thing. I had finally broken the silence, had finally spoken the words that had been trapped inside me for so long. The truth was out, raw and exposed, and no amount of shame or regret could take that back. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, a palpable entity in the opulent ballroom. It pressed against my eardrums, a physical manifestation of the shock that had gripped the room. I could hear my own pulse throbbing in my ears, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of absolute stillness. Faces, once animated with laughter and conversation, were now frozen masks of disbelief. Some gaped openly, their mouths forming silent O's of astonishment. Others stared at Michael, their expressions a mixture of disgust and pity. His new in-laws, seated stiffly at the head table, looked like they'd swallowed lemons, their faces pinched and pale. Amelia, her perfect composure finally cracking, stared at Michael, her eyes wide with a mixture of hurt and confusion. Michael stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I can explain. It was a joke. A terrible joke. His words hung in the air, flimsy and unconvincing, shredded by the weight of the silence that followed. No one bought it. Not a single person in that room believed his pathetic excuse. The truth was out, stark and undeniable, and no amount of stammering or backpedaling could erase it. He tried again, his voice rising slightly, a desperate plea for understanding. It wasn't meant to be malicious, it was just a misunderstanding. But the words felt hollow, empty, devoid of any real remorse. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done, he was sorry he'd been caught. The realization hit me with a sickening thud, a final nail in the coffin of our already fractured relationship. The wedding continued, because what else could we do? The cake was cut, the first dance was danced, the champagne flowed. But the atmosphere was irrevocably changed. The glittering facade had shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The whispers continued, hushed and speculative, like a swarm of insects buzzing around a rotting carcass. The joy, the celebration, the magic of the day, it was all gone, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. I sat at a table, numb, watching the charade unfold. People avoided my gaze, unsure of what to say, how to act. I felt like a pariah, an outcast in the midst of this opulent celebration. The food sat untouched on my plate, the champagne flat and tasteless in my glass. All I could taste was the bitterness of betrayal, the sting of humiliation. I left early, slipping out of the ballroom unnoticed, the weight of the evening pressing down on me like a physical burden. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head, to process the whirlwind of emotions that had swept through me. I hailed a cab, sinking into the back seat, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. And as the cab pulled away from the plaza, leaving the glittering fairy tale behind, I couldn't help but wonder AITA for exposing my son's lie at his wedding? Was there a better way to handle this? I really don't know what to do anymore. I need an outside perspective.